and that the majority of people were mercenaries, and maybe you only had 300 or 400 actual homogeneous Byzantine soldiers there. The amount of money and time invested in each crew was substantial, and the Roman army and a soldier was ready to fight after a basic training program of a few months, and the Byzantine army, training lasted for about a year. Soldiers were expensive commodities. They knew that as an empire, they wouldn't be able to survive long. So they had to develop different ways of meeting different challenges. So they had to develop this grand strategy. We saw the art of war as a fluid science, maybe even experimented and tested different approaches. Diplomacy was something that they used time and again to, if you want to say, fight their enemies, but in a way it was really just a very subtle means of getting other people to, it's sort of like making friends with the neighborhood bully. So, now you don't have to worry about, anybody harassing you anymore. Or making friends with the guy who's bigger than the bully. So that's oftentimes a tactic that they employ with great success. And the most important part about this, and this is something that anybody could appreciate, was that it would not exhaust the people or the treasury. So morale stayed high and money stayed as free as possible. It wouldn't become more of a burden on the people. And it was used in various ways. The most popular was to make friends with your enemy's enemy. Another way was to offer alliances in terms of friendship, and these were certainly Byzantine specialties. Something that I found fascinating when, in the book that I showed you guys earlier by Edward Lovelock on Byzantine grand strategy, was he has a chapter on how ambassadors were trained and how they were recruited. It completely floored me when I was reading this because they put as much training, if not more training, in their ambassadors than they did in their military. These men were oftentimes taken from the best families. They were given the training that lasted years, and they were promised if they did it well that they may not die. So, they could go somewhere, and possibly come back. And one of the most impressive stories that I've ever seen was by a man named Zamarkos. And Zamarkos was given the mission to assuage Sasanian Persia, which is in modern-day Iraq and Iran, by going to a common enemy who lived beyond them over by China. Of course, no one had ever been to China, so this is different for them. He was chosen to travel thousands of miles across the most treacherous lands in order to treat, in order to sit there and come to terms with one of their potential allies to neutralize the Persian threat. The Persians were knocking on their doors, literally. If they didn't get this ally, the Byzantine Empire would have been done. Zamarkos took this journey, took this assignment. It took them just a year and a half to travel one way, just to go one way. They had never been there before. Just the idea of going through this, that what this man could have gone through, is just mind-boggling. He had no idea where he was going, how he was going to get there. They went to a certain point in the Black Sea. From that point onward, you're on your own. To give you an idea, I kind of threw this in red just so it kind of sticks out for you guys. Alexander the Great was nearly stopped in Sogdia, which is an area by the Hindu Kush, which is like in Pakistan, Afghanistan area. He almost had his campaign stopped there, and he went on for nearly 15 years fighting. He almost lost it in Sogdia. This is the same region that this guy had to travel through, and he was no military guy. Zamarkos and Sizable. Sizable was the Khan of the Turks, and he accepted the friendship and gifts presented by Zamarkos and decided to have Zamarkos and his party accompany him on his way to meet the Persians. When the Persian envoys were received, they were given a position of lesser importance at a banquet, while Zamarkos, a Roman, was given precedence. This was taken as an insult, which was intended, and now Persia was put between a rock and a hard place. It was almost instantaneous after this had happened that word got back to Persia, they started immediately withdrawing their troops from the fringes of the Byzantine Empire.
This was in what year? Right after Alexander the Great?
Oh, Alexander was 4th century BC. So we're talking, I don't know, 800, 900 years later, maybe even more. It might even be more like 1,000 years.
Confused with the time.
The reason why the sizable and the troops were so feared was because they were of the steppe warrior class. They were excellent horse archers. And now that they were known as their friends, Persia withdrew quietly. And if they did go to war with Persia, they would surely have lost. And knowing this, they decided to use a different approach by seeking out alliance and friendship with a possible enemy of Persia. And it wasn't something that was, assured. This is completely something that they had been trained for. They went out there and they knew it was all or nothing. So they had a lot of writing on this, which makes it even more impressive. And throughout Byzantine history, the Turk Khaganate and the Pechenegs, which are another offshoot, were questionably the most consistent allies of the empire over centuries. So no matter what you've heard about the Turks, they were always very loyal to Byzantium. Another tool that they used was prestige of the actual city of Constantinople. If anybody's familiar with the Hagia Sophia, Church of Holy Wisdom, things of this nature, the Theodosian walls that encompass the city, these were very impressive. They would bring in a lot of other dignitaries and things and woo and awe by walking them around Constantinople. And you also had a lot of non-compliant neighbors who were belligerent and outwardly aggressive. This is especially true of the Bulgars, who were just north and west of the Byzantine Empire. And also of Russia. And the way that they used their tactic was to convert them to Christianity. The funny thing is that when they converted them to Christianity, the Bulgars and the Russians now thought that they had a claim to the Byzantine throne. So not only did they have to convert them, they eventually had to send their daughters over there to marry some of these men through dynastic marriages. If you could take away one thing between the Roman military system and the Byzantine military system, it would be this. The Roman model was a type of annihilation. You either became our friend on a lower level, or we're going to completely destroy you. The Byzantines never had that intention. They wanted to make friends with as many people as possible, because they knew that today's enemy could be tomorrow's friend. And this maxim definitely served them very, very well. Okay, so we leave Byzantium when we go to feudal Europe. I had two terms that I kind of put up here for you. The first is just the term feudalism, because there's a lot of controversy just surrounding the term. There's a couple very, very popular historians, medieval historians, who don't even put any credence in the word feudalism, vassalage, any of these things. They think it's a construct that's just gained notoriety over time and actually, should be discarded. Jerry Bentley, who's a professor out of Hawaii, and Stephen Murillo out of Indiana, both agree that we should not use the term at all. And they're both military historians. But just to keep in line with this, because I disagree, I still think that this is still a very useful term. And it's something that I was brought up on, I'm sure you guys were too. So feudalism is a set of legal and military customs in medieval Europe that flourished between the 9th and 15th centuries. It is primarily a system founded on relationships, very personal relationships. Personal, I like to stress that it's a personal relationship, especially in the idea of vassalage. These are older books. These are from the 1930s. But they are fantastic when dealing with feudal society and feudalism at large. And the guy is a gifted writer. The imagery he provides is it's amazing. It's like literary prose. And they're very, very short books. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in the subject, to please read these two. Vassalage it's not so much a person, it's a mutual, I'm sorry about that, it's not a person, but it's persons who engage in it. It's a mutual obligation to a lord or monarch, oftentimes to a lord. In the context of the feudal system, the obligations often included military support and mutual protection. It was often, especially when you see like in the Knights era, so 10th century beyond, after 1066, because it was really a Norman invention. When you get to this point, you needed lords to protect you because you had no centralized government. Joseph Strayer talked about this. You had no central government, so you had no protection. There's a lot of brigandage. This is where you get the idea of a bishop. Bishops came into play because they were actually the protectors of these local localities, because you had no police force. I mean, you could literally walk out and just get yourself killed. So I mean, in order for you to have this protection, many of these people were either given the point of they could serve in some capacity, especially in the time of the Knights. You would serve 40 days, you would provide your own horse, you would provide your own means of service per year for your lord, and in return, you would get, his protection, you would get, a plot of land, this kind of thing. And it actually involved a lot more than this, but just to kind of give you an idea of what it did include. But you were as beholden to your Lord as your Lord was beholden to you. A lot of people don't understand that. They think it was all for the Lord, and that's not true. It was just as beneficial to the person who was sworn to him, and likewise that he was sworn to. This is an excellent book. Of course, it is a big, thick book, but it is actually compartmentalized into various sections. It treats with Italy, Germany, France, and England. So if you only wanted to read the section on England, you might look at 100 pages of this. But she is one of the most authoritative sources on the subject. And I would encourage you, if you wanted to read more, then to check this book out. You can also find a lot of, she has a lot of online interviews that she's done, talking about this book, thanks to quite a fascinating woman. And she's not even a professional historian of all things. She was actually a librarian before she turned over into history. To give you kind of a visual of the feudal hierarchy, you have your serfs, your knights, your lords, and your king. And oftentimes, there's something that we call multiple homages that you could give. There was a man named William the Marshal. And he was a Norman, fought in England, was very, very powerful. They called him magnates. And he was actually feared by a couple kings in the 12th and 15th centuries. And he actually, I think it was even stated that he had over 100 of these liege homages and things of this nature given and taken, which becomes a problem. So if you swore allegiance to Dr. Craig and then you swore allegiance to me, who has your allegiance if you both call on you? So this became problematic.